Welcome to the Competitive 40K podcast, brought to you by Vanguard Tactics. 40K Codex analysis, list building, strategy development, game theory, mentoring. Our mission, to help you become a better player and to raise the level of the game both on and off the tabletop. Here's your host, Stephen Box.
Hey guys, and welcome to episode number 15. I'm your host, Stephen, and today we're joined by Joe. How you doing, Joe?
Hi guys, nice to be here again, as always.
Back on the show.
I know, it's been a while. Back from lockdown.
Back from lockdown. And we're also joined by our co-host when we stream our games, Jake. How you doing, Jake?
I'm very well, thank you, Stephen, and thank you very much for having me.
Hey, no problem at all. And we've got a really good episode lined up for you guys today. We thought we would do, and as you can probably see from the title, the key units that we feel are just a really good pick at the moment for 9th edition. So we're going to cover every single faction. Now, we've looked at these units in a slightly different way. We've kind of thought, right, what would somebody that is, considering starting an army, maybe just first of all look at including? Now, these would be a very good pick just to make sure that you've got a really good HQ option in there, and then also ensuring that you've got some good troop choices, and then we're going to pick out a key unit. Now, we're going to try and steamroll through all of the 32 different factions, and hopefully you're going to leave today with lots of information and also maybe some units to look out for in the future if you're getting to the tabletop. And along with that, when you are playing, maybe some units to watch out for if your opponent's going to have them, because they might be, the units that are typically going to be most efficient, most effective, and, could cause you some problems on the tabletop. Now, some of the picks that we've gone for today might just be really good for their points. They might be really durable, that plays the mission really well, or their damage output might be absolutely ridiculous for that faction. So we're kind of trying to balance out, their durability versus their movement, or, maybe some buffs or abilities that they can bring to the table. So guys, we've divvied up the factions, haven't we?
Yes, we have. Quite evenly, I think.
Yeah, and we're going to whiz through these. So I'm going to bring you in, and we've kind of obviously took the factions that we play more often than not. And obviously there are some factions that we play more of than others. And but hopefully, with our experience across all three of us, we've come up against these factions enough, or at least had some sort of experience in playing with them or up against them, whether it's at, play testing, tournaments, whatever it might be. So let's get on with the first 16. We'll do 16 at a time. But before we get on to the first 16, I just want to say a massive thank you for everyone that's subscribed and also given us a review recently. It really, really helps us. And also a massive thank you to our sponsors, Foreground and Foreground Publishing. You can check them out at www.foregroundpublishing.co.uk. Really specialise in pre-painted terrain. So all you need to do is unbox, build and play. So massive thank you for Foreground for sponsoring today's show. So I'm going to head over to you first, Joe. And we got the Black Templars. So who's the top HQ unit in your opinion and why?
So in my humblest opinion, the top dog, it has got to be Chaplain Grimoldus.
Okay, why?
He's got a great stat line, he's a decent points, but his inbuilt abilities gives the Black Templars 2 denies for psychic abilities, and he gives all core units within 6 exploding 6 in combat. So every 6 to hit generates extra ones. And obviously, as we know, chaplains now have access to a lot more cooler powers in the new codex, but in the Black Templars one, they get the reroll ones, which makes him a lieutenant in combat. He has another ability which gives everyone +1 attack. So they're just chucking out lots and lots of attacks in combat.
And Black Templars really specialise, obviously, in the combat, getting that rerolls on the charge and things. So troops and why?
I've gone for assault intercessors on these guys. Obviously, they get the new chainsword, which gives them -1 AP and gives them the +1 attack. They have a stratagem which allows them to attack twice, and you can put 10 of them in a repulsor, so you can disembark and get in quite safely.
Very nice, very nice. And any sort of special unit that you feel like is, really top dog for the Black Templars?
For the Black Templars, not just thematically, but I've gone for the Blade Guard veterans on this one. They benefit a lot from having Grimoldus nearby with the rerolls to hit, the exploding 6s +1 attack, and they get access to transhuman, and They have access to a stratagem called Tenacious Assault. So when you try and fall out of combat from them, you roll a dice, and on a 2+, you can't fall back. So they're a really good trapping unit as well for them.
Very nice. And also they've got ability to kind of get like a free heroic intervention in a way, isn't it? So that's also nice to use with that Blade Guard, just to force people off objectives. So yes, very, very nice. Okay, good. So that's going to give you a bit of an overview. Any honourable mentions there or not?
I think aggressors are always strong of either option in this army. Now the Power Fists are damage 2 and getting the benefits from Grimoldus. He just makes them an absolute powerhouse unit.
Very nice, very nice. Okay, cool. Next up, we're going to go on to the Blood Angels, and I'm going to take this one. So for me, the top HQ has to be the Librarian. I think the Librarian really helps out. And this was actually a tough pick. There was a few other good ones I was considering, like the Sanguinary Priest, but I felt like the Librarian is the most toolbox unit, giving you abilities to fight first for null zone, which are really, really massive in terms of helping the Blood Angels out, because they don't really have that much to deal with, invulnerable saves, and they can be a tough matchup for the Blood Angels. And then the top troop choice has to be, for me, the Incursors, that ability to, get up the table, do actions, good points cost, nice and durable, and also there to protect your characters, as it's a very fast-moving army and not something that wants to foot slog. And then finally, the unit for me has to be the Sanguinary Guard. These guys are absolute powerhouses, getting +1 to hit near the Warlord, getting extra attacks in turn 3 when they hit that Assault Doctrine, and now they're flat damage 2 wounds each with a 2+ save. Absolutely incredible with those jump packs. So for me, they are the top 3. If you've got any of those in your list, I think that's really where you want to start, and then you can kind of build out some flavour from there, whether it's Death Company or whatever it might be. But it was very tough between those two, but for me, Sanguinary Guard just kind of took my top spot for me. Okay, Dark Angels, and we're going to head over to Jake. So Jake, what's your top HQ and why?
It's got to be personally for me the Chaplain, just due to the fact of obviously he has undeniable sort of litany powers, so there's nothing your opponent can do about them, and also a lot of the buffs that you're sort of seeing from him are just really useful in a Dark Angel army, whether that be +1 to wound, +1 to hit. So definitely for me, that's mainly the reason for the Chaplain.
Okay, and next up, the troops.
Again, it's a hard one, but I had to go with Incursors. Main reason being is because of that forward deployment you're having with them in a more of a castle-style army that Dark Angels are. It's really nice to have them on those objectives early, just to sort of sit there, get it, so then your castle can sort of just move up the board.
Very nice. And then what about your top unit of choice?
Again, another hard one for Dark Angels, but definitely for me, it's got to be Deathwing Knights. 3 wound each, toughness 4, 1+ save, 4+ invulnerable save. Have an inbuilt transhuman in the form of the Inner Circle, which means you can't wound them on better than a 4, 5, or 6. And then obviously you can take a Relic Banner if you do have an Ancient in your army, which also gives them a 5+ feel no pain. So just very, very tanky.
Yeah, very nice. And also this kind of plays really well into those units there, because obviously the Deathwing want to drop in, they want to be able to hit hard, having those cursors to sort of screen out your drop zone, and then getting that Chaplain in to get that +2 charge off as well. So there are other sort of little combos. Any unique mentions you wanted to give a shout out to?
Yes, definitely the Apothecary on bike. Just again for a very high mobility model. In terms of also base size for his auras as well, it's just like a little nice one to sort of have. And also, as I said, just for the mobility, and also the fact he's Raven Wing, so he can take a lot of those unique relics which you don't normally take in your army, which I think are very useful. Yeah,
to bring those Deathwing nice and close in.
Yes,
yeah, very
exactly.
Good. Okay, cool. So next up is the Death Watch, and again, I'll take this one. So for me, it's been really interesting playing Death Watch again on the table, but for me, I really feel like the Chaplain on bike is an absolute go-to. Again, getting that +2 to charge off is incredible when you've got so many units that want to come in from reserve or redeploy, and again, having this Chaplain with the Beacon and Jealous on him so you can redeploy a unit to you is super clutch, and then getting that +2 charge, it just gives you a lot more sort of reliability there. And then he's also with just like reroll misses, because a lot of the units that you will be taking and with the Death Watch do want to be ensuring that they're in fighting in all phases of the game, whether it's shooting and combat. So that brings me on to my top unit. So the top troop unit for me, I've just picked the one out of all the kill teams, and that is the Indomitus kill team. I think the 5 heavy intercessors with then 5 aggressors or plasma inceptors, or probably the best combo for me is going to be 5 heavy intercessors with the assault bolt, basically the assault bolter version, so they get 3 shots each, and then also 4 aggressors in there, and then also 1 plasma inceptor is probably a good little loadout. So you can fall back and shoot on a stratagem, you can become a white scar, so you can advance in charge with that unit. There's so many little buffs and abilities you can put on them with a 5+ feel no pain, 5+ invulnerable save, and they're just extremely tanky. So for me, that is the kill team of my choice. And again, we're going to now move on to back to Jake now with the Grey Knights.
Yes, so definitely top HQ for them has to be, for me, it's a toss-up between Drago and Voldus, but I think Voldus wins out just because, he's got a flat 3 damage Thunderhammer that doesn't have any minuses. Obviously, he's a Grand Master in the grand scheme of things. He's got that really nice Smite ability as well. And yeah, I think he's just a super solid pick for that. In terms of troops, it has to be, for me, Terminators. They are sort of the key staple of Grey Knights, and they really do show it. They have amazing shooting output with what you can give them. They've got an amazing spell combination you can use from the characters, such as the Ignore line of sight spells, +1 wound spells and all that. And also having the tides as well. They sort of play in every tide really well. And then for unit-wise, I think it is basically just what I've said again. It's Paladins, but basically they are just 3 wound Terminators for the Grey Knights.
Yeah, and they're just like what the Grey Knights do great at is that having that durability on the table, which they really need. Obviously, we don't know what will happen in the future with the new Grey Knight Codex whenever that gets released, but we'll see in terms of wounding and stuff. But for now, these are certainly our top picks. Any sort of shout outs you'd like to give to any other units?
Just one, and that is the Apothecary. Again, it is just because obviously when you're running a more elite army, you need someone to bring those models back, and that Apothecary just does that.
Yeah. Okay. Very nice. Very nice. Okay. Cool. Now over to you, Joe. Imperial Fists.
With the Imperial Fists. So for the captain on bike, he's a solid choice for a HQ. He can tank a lot and he's got a lot of options. Being toughness 5 makes him a lot more survivable. Being on a bike means that he can get around the table to support different units a lot quicker. And he's just going to basically give your army everything he needs. Plus, they have access to the relic, the Eye of Hopef, which gives him reroll 1s to wound. So he's an inbuilt lieutenant at the same time.
So he's captain and lieutenant running around a bike. So if you're pairing him up with lots of attack bikes with heavy bolters that play really well with the Imperial Fist, it could be obviously a really good option. Or suppressors, he can keep pace, which is nice. Okay, cool. Top troops.
I like to stay simple with the fists on this one, so I've gone as your basic intercessors. They have access to the normal bolt rifle with their bolter drill, means that they can just chuck out a lot of shots. With the tactical doctrine on, you're -2 with those exploding 6s. You can spend a CP, so every 6 is an additional 2 hits with those, which is really strong and ignoring cover. Or you can give them the heavy bolt rifles, which gets the same benefits on top. And also they have a stratagem which allows them to shoot twice. So getting the bonus from the captain on bike, these guys can just hose down anything on the table quite efficiently.
Anytime you can put a unit or a buff on a unit and then double shoot it is very, very strong. Yeah. So I think that's kind of doubling down, similar to like the Assault Intercessors with their fight twice mechanic as well. Okay, cool. And your top unit of choice then?
It has to be the Bolter Aggressors.
Bolter Aggressors.
The Bolter Aggressors, because Imperial Fists, like bolt guns, like I said, with the Intercessors, you can pay the stratagem, so every 6 to hit is 2. When these guys are putting out a ridiculous amount of shots on basic, and on average, you're getting an extra 4 to 6 hits per guy. With the Chapter Master rerolls, the Lieutenant rerolls, you can put these guys into anything, and it's probably going to kill it in 1 round of shooting, or leave it limping away, and then you can go in and finish them off with the Power Fists.
No, very nice. Okay, cool. So for me, next we're on the Raven Guard. And the Raven Guard, I've gone for a chaplain on bike again. I mean, you're probably going to see this guy crop up a few times. But again, what an absolute linchpin model this one is. And again, for him, he can obviously redeploy, which is incredible. I was also very tempted to put Shrike in as well. I think his buffs are really, really good for the Raven Guard. And we're going to keep these to pure Raven Guard rather than worrying about successes and things like that. So it was a real toss-up between the two. Whether if you've gone for more of a combat style, you want the obviously chaplain on bike. But if you've gone for a bit more re-rolls in terms of needing the hit rolls, then that could also be an option to go for something like Shrike instead. Obviously, the Chaplain on Bike could also give you +1 to hit, which again is great. For me, the troops, though, is the Infiltrators. Again, you want early board presence, and for them to be able to zone out your opponent works really, really well based on their other stratagems that they have, where you cannot go within 9 inches of an enemy model when you pre-game move, which brings me on to my next unit. And I was really torn between Vanguard Vets, but it had to go to Plasma Inceptors. Either getting +1 to hit from the Chaplain on Bike with that litany, being able to pre-game move as well, or re-rolls from Shrike. I mean, it was it's all good. So if you're going Vanguard Vets or Plasma Inceptors, a good unit of 5 or 6 of those is absolutely incredible, and why not take 18? So that's a pretty strong combination, I think, for the Raven Guard, and they got some really good movement tricks, and those Infiltrators just being able to zone out your opponent and making sure you can either deep strike or pre-game move to where you want to is super important, which is why I think they're more important than the Incursors in that matchup. So now we're going to go back over to you, Joe, and you've got the Iron Hands.
I have. They're an army that I jumped on immediately when they were released. So I had a bit of play with them. Not seen much play with them since, but they are holding strong. So HQ has to be Ferios. He's got a great stat line. He's got his heavy barter. He's good in combat, but his real strengths lie in his support abilities. So his ability to repair a vehicle to max 3 wounds, and you can pay a stratagem, so he can do that twice. Not on the same one, but if you've got multiple vehicles, which you probably will, then you can get them back up to the top quite strongly. He's got a Signum, so he can pick a unit and they get +1 to hit with their shooting. Incredibly strong, especially in this army. And also he gives all units within 6 inches a 5+ invulnerable save.
Very nice. And then what about your top troop?
I think the best troops for these guys is going to be the Heavy Intercessors. 3 wounds, toughness 5 with the 6 up feel no pains that comes from being an Iron Hands. And all their weapons are heavy. So when you're in the Devastator Doctrine, you can move and shoot and fire those heavy weapons with no negative modifiers. Plus they get access to things like Transhuman. They're going to be a really strong option within this army.
Very nice. And then your top unit?
One that's kind of fallen out of favour since the rules have changed, but I think it's going to be it is really strong within the Iron Hands, and that is the Leviathan Dreadnought. Its ballistic skill's gone down to 3, but with Ferius you can put it back up to 2. Its strength and toughness 7, which isn't a major flaw, but it still has got that 2-up armor save, and it has got a 5-up invulnerable. And you can still give it the 2 storm cannons, which are still heavy 8, strength 7, -1, 2 damage, but you can pay a stratagem to keep putting it in the Devastator Doctrine, so it's back to -2. You can play a stratagem to make it a character and give it a Warlord trait, which one of them gives it either a 5-up feel no pain, or my personal favourite is on a 6 to hit, it generates extra hits, so that's 18 hits hitting on 2s. You're going to be generating lots of extra hits, and then you play a stratagem for every 6 to wounds twice. So those 16 shots, you're probably looking at about 16 wounds with failed rerolls or failed to wounds on top of that.
So just a lot of buffs on him, and also you can turn him into a lieutenant or a captain as well for the turn, which is very nice. Okay, cool. So next up, we're going to be, it's back to me now, and this is going to be the Space Wolves. Again, I'm putting him in there. It's a Chaplain on Bike. What an absolute beast. You could take a Wolf Lord on Thunderwolf Cavalry as well. Also a good option. Or if you wanted something, that with similar mobility, but maybe can work through more terrain, could be just a Wolf Lord with a jump pack. So each of those options are pretty decent, in my opinion. You've then also got for the troop choice, when you've got a unit that is so good in combat anyway, with getting the +1 to hit, the heroic intervention, anytime you can stack on more combat buffs, for me, it has to be the Assault Intercessors. So again, they're really, really good. And it was a sort of toss-up between them and the Blood Claws coming out Rhinos, but I felt like the Assault Intercessors just kind of took it because of that ability to fight twice. So for me, if that would be a really good option. And then also the standout unit is the Thunderwolf Cavalry. These guys, you can load them out however you want. Storm Shield plus whatever weapon you want to deal with your opponent, whether it's Power Fists or Thunderhammers getting that +1 attack. Personally, I'd probably go on the side of the Power Fists because they're a little bit cheaper and pretty much do the same amount of damage. Or you could go Lightning Claws, which are also awesome if you need to deal with more power armor. or just lots of troops. So it really depends on the loadout that you want, but just you need to have a Storm Shield on these guys, and they are super tough, super durable. And when your whole army can get OBSEC, and having OBSEC Thunderwolf Cavalry is awesome with the Warlord trait Rites of War on, hopefully keeping pace, that Chaplain on Bike or Wolf Lord. So again, that's why you need that good mobility, is to really buff up those key units. Okay, Jake, we're going to jump over to you, and we're going to go for the White Scars in who is your top HQ?
So again, that HQ option has to be that Chaplain on Bike. A million reasons, like Stephen's already mentioned, in different armies, but the main one for White Scars is because for that combat prowess, he has that litany of +1 to wound, which is just general marine litany. You can also give him relics such as the Plume of the Plains Rider, which is a White Scar one for +1 to run and charge, which is just really good. Or you can give him a combat sort of more option with that special Crozius. In terms of troops, it has to be those incursors for me. White Scars have a strat which allows them to double move, which when obviously you have a forward deploying unit, means you can get them really quickly into someone's deployment zone for any sort of actions or just holding objectives. And then finally, I think unit-wise, it's got to be the aggressors. Again, running and charging, fall back and charging, a stratagem to allow them to fall back and shoot. They can run and shoot, obviously, with no penalty due to the White Scars normal sort of ability. And then in that super doctrine, it means they're free damage at -4 with their power fist. So again, just really solid for that unit.
Yeah, really strong for the meta. When you've got things like Scorpec running around, other Paladins, Custode, there's a lot of 3 wounds units out there, or even Intercessors with a Feel No Pain. Whatever it might be. Disgusting Resilience has just been released at that -1 damage. So what do you want to put into a unit with 2 wounds? You want to put something with damage 3 in, so you can go hopefully straight through and no messing about. So again, having a flat 3 damage unit is super strong when you get into that turn 3 assault doctrine. You did forget to mention that you could have a flying Chaplain on Bike,
yes.
which is very cool, or just basically ignores terrain, which is one of the issues with a bike, is obviously it can't just move through terrain, but when you can ignore it, that's amazing. So next up is going to be myself, and we're going to be looking at the Ultramarines. This was super tough between Calgar and Tigerius, both incredible characters for the HQ options. An honourable shout out to Gulliman as well. What a great option as well he is now. So, but obviously he isn't a HQ, he's a Lord of War, so he didn't fit for me, but I'm going to go with Calgar. I think for his points, the extra CPs, Ultramarines can do really well with lots of CPs, so having 2 extra is brilliant. Is incredibly tough to kill. And that therefore brings us on to the troops, which is going to be for me Intercessors. Like Joe said, just putting out so many shots, being able to stand or count as stationary, which is wicked, double shooting, lots of great mobility there, being able to move and shoot in counter stationing is brilliant, obviously for being able to rapid fire. And then also for the unit of choice, you could go in so many different directions with these. Eradicators are great, suppressors are brilliant, because obviously you can count as stationary, but for me it is those aggressors once again. Losing their double shoot hasn't really impacted, I think, the unit's damage output, because it can pretty much overkill most things anyway. And again, with a lot of the Ultramarine buffs, with like Standard and Macragge getting +1 attack, and then also getting +1 to hit off a company Ancient, getting some Calgar rerolls, just a really good formidable bubble that you can create and bully your opponent off the middle of the table with just so many shots. So again, absolutely brilliant. And for 1 CP, fullback shoot, fullback charge, they also start to act like White Scars. So yeah, I think you can see a lot of sort of synergies there. Okay, and then finally, last but not least, Joe, we're back to you, and we've got the Salamanders.
So, as we all know, I've got a bit of love for the Salamanders. HQ-wise, I really wanted to choose Adrax on this one, but I have to give it to Vulcan.
Ooh.
Yeah, he's old school. He's got a 2-up save, 3-up invuln. He's still a captain, so he gives out those reroll ones to hit. But his main ability is you pick 1 core unit within 6, and they re-roll all hits and wounds on melter and flamer weapons.
Yeah, and it's not like there's not enough good melter or flame options in the books these days, right?
The fact that you can run 18 of the Eradicators in your list, or you can run 18 flamer aggressors, it's just an obvious choice for them. It really is, especially when all those flame weapons are getting +1 to wound turns 2 and 3.
Okay, nice. Your troops.
I've gone for heavy intercessors on this one because they benefit the most from the -1 AP ignoring for salamanders, and having the 3 wounds, toughness 5, they're just a really solid option because salamanders kind of tend to bubble up. You want those 3 wound guys to have to chew through before your opponent has to deal with the next unit, which is flamer aggressors.
Okay, very nice. And that's what you've gone for, the flamer aggressors over eradicators. It's a big call. It's a big call, Joe.
The flamer aggressors have access to a stratagem which allows them to have maximum shots on those flamers. And now flamers have gone to 12-inch range, and re-rolling to wound is real strong. It's real strong in this list. And also, if your opponent charges you, they can overwatch, kind of like Tau, for a friendly unit, and then they can counter charge in 2d6 inches. You're also getting +1 to wound stratagem if you're not in the tactical doctrine, but you also have access to another stratagem which gives them +1. It's -1 to be wounded. It's really, really strong.
Very nice.
So I would like to make a honourable mention to tactical squads and stern guard in drop pods in this list because you can put so many flamers on them. Stern guard unit, 10 flamers, that's 60 hits with that stratagem. And now the 12-inch range, they're actually a viable option to put into drop pods.
Yeah, okay. It's different.
It is very different.
But I like it.
But if you're thinking out of the box and you want something to catch people out, early game 10 stern guard with 60 flamer shots into your opponent is going to clear a screen pretty quick.
Very nice. So that concludes all of the Space Marines. And next up, we're going to be heading into the Imperium factions. And I'm going to kick it off with the Adeptus Sororitas. And for me, the top HQ has to be Celestine, giving you that +1 invulnerable save to units, obviously, like your other sisters, and then also getting you that miracle dice because she's on the table. I mean, what's not to like about, a flying angel that can go around chopping off heads, and she's so good in combat as well. The Triumvirate is good. I just feel like Celestine, you can protect her a little bit more. She's very mobile. In some of the other units that you probably want to run her with, having that mobility for me is key. So, yeah, really like what Celestine can bring to the table. Also, just a little honourable mention there, a Preacher just giving you that +1 attack, or a Priest even, for so cheap. Getting +1 attack is awesome as well. So, just maybe you need to have a Priest in your list if you are going for those sisters. And then for troops, they've literally just got the Battle Sisters, so say no more, but they're actually a pretty decent option, with a 3+ save. What more do you want, really, from a troop unit? So, very, very nice. Then also for the main unit, you've heard me talk about these girls before, but they are the Repentia, probably one of the most hardest-hitting combat units in the game for their points cost. They do die extremely quickly, but these girls pack such a punch. You can put a unit of 9 into 20 Necron Warriors, and there will not be 20 Necron Warriors left at the end of that, with the ability to fight twice, exploding 6s, +1 attack, +1 to wound, +1 strength. There's so many ways to buff this unit up, so really like the Repentia. And probably an honourable shout out is actually Retributors now with their multi-melters. You can take 4 in a squad, and then you can take 2 cherubs, so you can then double tap a couple of them. You can get an extra 12-inch range. You can move and shoot without penalties. And also, not only do you get extra range, but you can also get extra damage as well. So, yeah, again, nice little mobile fire base with those Retributors. So, yeah, but Repentia for me, for their points cost, really take it. Okay, next up then, we're going to go back to you, Joe. You've got the Adeptus Custodes.
You mean my new favourite army?
Boo, boo,
They
boo,
are
boo, boo.
So good. I was so happy to get these painted over lockdown because they're amazing. And my first outing with them, I beat you. So what more can I say?
It was grim. No,
Yeah.
Joe is our current reigning champion on stream. Absolutely destroyed my chaos. And wow, it was, I think I rolled something like 400 dice into you and killed 5.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the biggest slog games ever, wasn't it?
Oh,
anyway.
yeah.
But anyway, it was a good game. So I can't wait to do the repeat game where I'm going to try and become the victor. Anyway, so back to the Custodes. Joe, who is the main man you're going to be taking?
The main man who has to go into every Custodes force.
Big call. That's a big call, that.
Trajan Valores. His main buffs, you got reroll to hit and wound rolls of 1, but everyone in 6 is real strong, especially in an army where you're essentially hitting everything and wounding everything on 2s.
Yeah.
So rerolling those ones, they should just make Custodes just automatically hit.
I don't know why you bother rolling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's madness. And then he has an ability where he can either attack twice in combat, or you can play a stratagem for free. And especially when the Custodes have access to a lot of expensive stratagems, it's a really strong buff.
Very nice. Okay, troops.
Troops, I've gone for the Sagittarium, the Forge-World unit. They're a newer unit for the army, but it's a 3 to 10 man squad, all carrying assault heavy bolters.
Ugh. Grim.
Yeah, so strength. So it's assault 3, 36-inch range, strength 5, -1, flat 2 damage. And they do have an alternate mode. It's only 15-inch range, still strength 5, but it's -3, flat 3.
The one pump.
The one, and that they rerolling hit rolls and wound rolls of 1. They can make a mess.
They
of
do
everything.
Yeah. I didn't have many Chaos Marines left after taking a round from those guys. Yeah, okay, I would agree with that. And then also, you can give them a little combat ability as well. You can take the Misericordia to get some good combat attacks.
The Misericordia gives them an extra attack in combat, so each one's got 4 attacks at strength 5, -2, 1 damage. It's because they are base strength 5 and putting out 20 attacks on a 5-man unit. They just pummel anything that tries to deal with them, especially when they're on the back line. And most of the stuff that comes in on the back line tends to be smaller one wound units.
Yeah, it's good. Really, really good. Okay, cool. And your unit of choice?
Another Forge-World unit in the Venerati, the Birdmen.
Today's show was not sponsored by Forge World, just so you know, guys, or Chaplains on Bikes. But anyway, go on.
It's the Venerati, the newer jump pack Custodes, recently been upgraded from a 3-up save to a 2-up save when they've got the buckler, which means they've got the same stat profile as a normal Custodes, which is strong for them. But it's all about their pistol they have. You take these guys in the Solar Watch, and they have access to a stratagem for 1 CP where you double the number of shots that they fire. Their pistol is pistol 2, 12-inch range, strength 6, -2, 2 damage. And every roll of a 6 to hit, you generate an extra hit.
Okay, right. So, yep, that'll do it.
Yeah.
No, I like it.
Yeah, so a 5-man unit putting out lots of shots, they'll just tear through anything.
Yeah, very nice. Okay, cool. So next up, we've got the Astra Militarum. Jake, take it away.
So the first unit, the HQ unit, is, for me, tank commanders. Now, the reason is because they have a great damage output, but lots of different weapon options that they can have. And they're also quite a self-buffing unit. You don't actually need a lot of other things to really run with them. You can take, obviously, the loadouts depending on sort of what meta you're in. And also the tank ace traits from the Greater Good, allowing them to either advance and shoot, you can give them a 2-up save, you can give their main gun an additional -1. So just really solid there.
Yeah, and being able to order yourself to move out of the way of oncoming firepower, so you can move, shoot, and move out of the way again, especially when you've got plenty of obscuring terrain from Talon tanks, is very, very good, I think, in this edition of the game. Okay, cool. And troop choice?
Troop choice for me, I think there's only one in my eyes that really stands out, and that's the Tempestus Scions, the basic troops. Reason being, obviously, they've got inbuilt deep strike, which is really handy in the meta at the moment, obviously, with all the objectives, wanting to hold that, also for engaging all fronts. They have really good AP on their weapons, lower strength, but, having that AP really helps versus Marines and Necrons. And then also you can have them in their own detachment to benefit from the different sort of Scion traits, or you can just slot them into your own Astra Militarum detachment, saving on those CPs, having to take lots of different detachments.
Yeah, you can have them as little, 3 deep striking action monkeys, or they can actually, put a hurt in, as I found out yesterday when we were doing some testing, weren't we?
Yeah.
So I like it.
They're strong. They do have access to a stratagem when you're in half range that gives them +1 strength, which means in the Space Marine meta does make them quite strong.
Yeah, nice. Okay, and your top unit, mate?
For me, it has to be Bullgrins, just because of they are very sturdy in terms of, 3-up armor save with their, the buffs you can give them. From a priest and a psyche, you can make them -1 to hit. You can give them +1 armor save. The priest can give them extra attacks. So for me, if you want a unit just to walk up and hold that center, so then your tanks can sort of freely do what they want, it is Bullgrins for me.
Yeah, and they really offer you something else that the rest of the army doesn't. So I think that's why they are a real key linchpin unit. But, with Guard being able to access so much indirect firepower, just having that, big old unit in the center of the table to be a bit of a counter charge, press onto some objectives, kick people off them. Really, really good. Okay, very nice. So we're going to head back to you now, Joe. And you've got the AdMech.
Oh, yes. I've had a lot of success with these. HQ option is a real obvious choice on this one, as Belisari is cool. He's pretty good as his basic stat profile, but the fact that he gives everyone reroll hits in shooting is something that you can't ignore.
And also your ability to manipulate the canticle, because the Mars canticle is so good.
Yeah.
So I think really being able to manipulate your canticles like you can now with that Mars one being so strong. And reroll misses is brilliant in this edition. So yeah, okay, very nice. I will definitely agree with you there. Okay, next up, your top troop unit.
Top troops has to be destroyers.
Ooh, it's a bold one.
They're an infantry move unit, so they can move through walls. They've got high toughness, high strength, not many attacks, but it's the fact that there are these gun platforms that move around firing heavy weapons with no negatives. So is really, really strong, especially with the fact that the plasma cannons have now got blast. Is really good.
Yeah, and there's the good toughness, good amount of wounds, and again, breaches could be another good choice there if they're a little bit cheaper. But again, probably a little bit more survivable. But anyway, whichever way you go is a good option. Okay, what is your top unit? I know what you're going to say, but I think I've got another one what I would like to give a shout out to. So go on, who is your top unit? My
top unit is kind of chosen on the fact that they actually pair really well with the destroyers, and that's the Castellan robots. The fact that now they can move and shoot with no negative modifiers, they have access to a stratagem where if they're within 6 inches of a unit of destroyers, they can get +1 to hit. Having the 3 phosphor blasters on there, they just put out a huge amount of shots with the rerolls from Cool and things like Wrath of Mars with mortal wounds. You can point them at a knight and just kill it in 1 round of shooting. I always have them in Protector Doctrine now, so they've got a 2-up save and a 4-up invulnerable. And if you do try and shoot at them, like they're toughness 6, so you're going to really struggle to get through them.
They can fire in combat now, which is massive. So
there's no more locking them down, keeping them out of the fight, because they can just keep going.
Yeah, they're so good for that. The honourable mention from me is the Raiders. The horsey dogs, their stratagem to fall back basically when they're declared as a charged up to 12 inches is so good. It just means that some armies like Blood Angels can't really touch them. They can screen out the rest of your army so well. But you've paired those 3 things really well together, which I'm gonna. Yeah, I love it, Joe. I think we can probably leave it to the next one. So over to you now, Jake. We're gonna head over to the Imperial Knights. Bit different, obviously, because they don't really take HQ's troops and units, but I just want you to focus on a unit maybe you think, what was a standout for you and why?
So, it's, for me, the one thing I really wanted to talk about when it came to the Imperial Knights was the Castellan.
Sorry, who?
The Imperial Knight Castellan.
Sorry, who? I remember this one back in...
Ancient times. Cast your mind back to 8th edition. Smash captains everywhere. Guardsmen loving it.
Oh, the thing that had a 3+ invulnerable save, you couldn't kill it, and it just looked at everything. And I'm having some flashbacks. I'm having flashbacks. Okay, talk to me about the Castellan.
Now, I really like this guy for a number of reasons, but we'll just sort of note the key ones. The first one being his loadout choices. You can give him a Warlord trait in the form of Iron Bulwark, so he has a 4+ invulnerable save. You can give him the Relic Plasma Cannon Calls Wrath, which basically makes him, Strength 8 -4 2 damage, or Overcharge for Strength 9 -4 3 damage. Really solid in the Marine meta we're seeing at the moment. And also, this is more so why I really like him. He's a very universally independently working model. You put him in your army, he has a lot of points, but you don't really need to be spending stratagems on him. And for me, when you're looking at a model to slot into your army to do all the roles, he does it perfectly. And also, your opponent will be really scared of him with that PTSD from 8th edition if they do remember him, and just try and take him off the table, which they'll quickly find out it won't happen.
Yeah, and you cannot leave models on the table in front of him because he will pick them up. Being able to shoot indirectly and things. Yeah, what an absolute monster. Okay, cool. So next up, I'm going to talk about Chaos Knights. Chaos Knights are a little army that I've been playing recently, and I'm actually quite enjoying them. Obviously, Jake's already spoke about the Castellan, so I'm not going to talk that. But I'm going to talk about my favourite loadout, and that is just taking a regular Chaos Knight and giving them a sword and a thermal cannon. Keeps it really, really cheap. And that then gives you enough points then with the thermal and the sword to make sure that you've got some damage output in combat, which is really good. It's got the blast, and also it gives you the extra points to take 3 of these guys with 3 of the indirect fire guns, and it also gives you plenty of points to take war dogs with those auto cannons, which I think are a really, really good other unit that can support the Chaos Knights, helping score on things like domination or engage in all fronts. So again, I think having multiple amounts of knights in an army is key. So yeah, for me, keep it cheap. And then one little shout out is the Psycho Knight, making one a Tzeentch model just really opens up another ability for you to do some psychic actions as well, and then taking the Warlord trait so that if he does die on a 4+, he can stand back up again. So you can do like psychic action in the middle of the table when you're wholly within 6 or whatever it might be. So again, just opens up some other options for you there. You've got the guy that can heroically intervene 6 inches with OBSEC. So yeah, I think that's my shout outs is playing around with your relics and warlord traits to really get the most out of your Chaos Knights. Okay, we're going to go back over to you, Jake, and Chaos Demons. Who is your top HQ?
Now, for me, there was a really sort of hard choice between 2, but one then ultimately just stood out to me, and that is the Lord of Change, the Big Bird. First off, obviously, Warlord traits relics wise, you can give him a 3+ invulnerable save from the Impossible Robes, and then a -1 damage on Imperial form. And at the moment, with what you're seeing, a lot of 2 to 3 damage, having a 16 wound model taking that isn't ideal. So that -1 damage is really making him tanky. Second off is obviously the exalted traits that they got in Engine War. The main one I'll talk about, which I think is the best one, is the 6+ Feel No Pain, that for every Feel No Pain you pass, not only do you negate a wound, you also heal a wound, which can just be insanely frustrating to deal with. And he's also quite cheap. He's coming in at about 240 points, I believe, 270, depending on sort of what weapon loadout you give him. So for me, he really sits above the top of the Chaos Pantheon.
Okay, nice. And then troops?
Nurglings. Again, just really cheap at 18 points a model, forward deploying, 4 wounds each, 5+ invulnerable save, 5+ disgusting resilience against the sort of 1 damage weapons.
Obviously, that might change going forward now, but
at the time of recording, 5+ Feel No Pain, really great. And also, they have a really sneaky stratagem for 1 command point, which is for every single one that has died at the end of a turn, you roll a dice, on a 5+, you get them back.
Very good.
Which is very annoying to deal with.
Okay, standout unit.
I really like Flamers of Tzeentch, and the reason being is because they're quite cheap, coming in at 20 sort of points a model for a 2 wound fly model. They have a 12-inch D6 pistol flamer, which can be strength 5 -1, 6 is mortal wounds for 1 CP, a spell for +1 to wound. So you can have them in combat and they can sort of really kill whatever they need to, and then fly off and do something else with that.
Very nice. Yeah, good little utility bit of kit there. Okay, no, I like that justification. So up next, we are going to look at the Death Guard. Now, this may change, obviously, as the Death Guard releases are coming out thick and fast. But Jake, give us your opinion as to what they're looking like at the moment.
Yeah, so as Stephen said, obviously a lot of this could be subject to change, but as it currently stands, in my opinion, these are sort of the top sort of units to take. So in terms of HQ, I think that a sorcerer, really, you keep it cheap. You want those spells, just for those extra buffs, such as +1 strength and toughness for a unit of infantry, taking those Plague Marines to strength 5, toughness 6, which is just really helpful. In terms of units for the troops, I think there's only one, and it's Plague Marines, especially, their toughness 5, as it currently stands, 5+ disgusting resilience save, which will be going to -1 damage. But obviously with their 2 wound change coming in, that's going to be really helpful for them. Obviously the stratagems you can give them. So as it currently stands, you can do a strat, which means they can't be targeted unless they're the closest unit, which again is just super, super helpful.
Yeah, and these are sort of thematic that we would hopefully continue to see in the new book anyway. Okay, very nice. And what's a standout unit or two for this book?
I think there's 2, and it's only because they are single characters. So the first is the Biologist Putrefier, and basically he's the nickname the Grenade Man. So he can pick a unit of Death Guard infantry, and he makes all of their blight grenades +1 strength, taking them to strength 4, and flat 2 damage. And any 6+ they roll to wound is also a mortal wound. So combining that with Veterans of the Long War and a stratagem which allows 10 of them to throw grenades, you pretty much can look at a unit within 12 and just take it off the table. And the second is the Foul Blight Spawn, really powerful flamer, a strat to make it a 14-inch flamer, really high strength, flat 3 damage, and also can allow a unit within 7 to fight last. So very, very good.
Yes, very nice. No, absolutely. I think one of the other things as well is just as we're seeing more and more these things come out, it's going to be interesting to see how much Mortarion has to offer. So that's going to be an interesting one for the Death Guard as their new stuff gets released. So next up we've got the Chaos Space Marines. Now this is an army that I've been kind of diving into as late, an army that I had some pretty good success with in 8th edition at a couple of events, and sort of really getting my teeth stuck back into them now. They've obviously got loads of different sort of books they can draw from. But for me, again, I think for that HQ, it was tough. Fabius Bile nearly made it in for his ability to buff up any Heretic Astartes unit. Giving them +1 toughness, for example, can be super good. But the only problem with him is that he cannot fit into any Space Marine army anymore, unless you're going to take it as an unbound or an unaligned kind of army where you're not going to get any army buff whatsoever. So he did nearly make it in, but for me, just again, a Chaos Sorcerer, knowing 2 spells, having access to warp time to double move a unit, +1 to hit on a unit, or whatever it might be from like a +1 invulnerable save, or 5+ feel no pain. There's just so many great options, and not to mention Death Hex, where you can take away an enemy unit's invulnerable save. So it's just got so much utility for the points, giving them a jump pack, whatever it might be, some good mobility. So yeah, absolutely a Chaos Sorcerer, in my opinion, is a must. And then whether you prefer Demon Prince, Chaos Lord, is totally up to you. Okay, then obviously for the troops, I mean, there's lots of different ways to take different styles of troops depending on what sort of army you are. Like, for example, I really like Noise Marines as a troop option in my Emperor's Children army. But just across the board, you can't really go wrong with a Chaos Space Marine. They're pretty cheap and cheerful, and hopefully in the future, if they do go up to another wound, then they'll be a really good backfield objective holder, and they'll be pretty tough and resilient, and to be a great little unit to do actions for you. So that'll be good. And then finally, the unit of choice for the Chaos Space Marines. Again, it was difficult. There's some units that are good in certain books. For example, Obliterators can be good in Iron Warriors, but maybe not so great in others because they lack the rerolls. Possessed are good in certain ways, but not in others. But for me, I felt that the Terminators were just a very good overall arching unit. You can either go very expensive and go Combi Plasma on every single option, or Combi Melter. You can double shoot them. Now with Lightning Claws and Power Weapons getting an overall boost in the game, or you can keep them really, really cheap and just go for Combi Bolters and also that Chain Axe to keep them really cheap. And again, if they get the Space Marine treatment, then I think Terminators, a big old block of 10, no matter what faction you put them in, or type of chaos you put them in, should I say, I think they're going to be a pretty good option to take. So I think Terminators for me are just a really good unit, and also the models that they brought out look pretty good. So, okay, next up then, we're going to go back over to Jake, and we're going to look at the Thousand Sons.
Yes, I think probably the more interesting Chaos faction in terms of the unique books. So the first one you got in for the HQ. Now, it was really hard between a few of the choices, but I decided in the end to go with just the old Demon Prince, just because obviously he's a master of sort of all. So he can have some really good traits, so 3+ invulnerable save for a Warlord trait. He can do +1 to cast with a Warlord trait, it's really powerful. In the different cults, such as Duplicity and Magic, obviously you can have a more mortal wound based one, or you can have a more utility based one. So again, just an overall character that does quite a lot for an army that doesn't have a lot of choice. For troops, I decided to go with Rubric Marines. Again, just I think looking to the future potentially on this one with the 2 wounds, but as it currently stands, 3+ armor save, they have an inbuilt invulnerable save, they're also a psyker, and then also you have the, if you're versus 1 damage, they get +1 to their save, which, you know, as sort of the edition goes on may not be too useful, but as it currently stands, I think is a really nice little thing to have.
No, I'd agree with that. You know, when you've got, you know, going up against armies with mortars in, you know, they just want to fish you off those backfield objectives. And if you're just sat there with a 1+ save, it's pretty strong. So, yeah, I think they're a good choice. And like you said, you know, thinking forward, if they do get the marine treatment, then they're going to be looking pretty spicy. Okay, what is a unit then that you would think might be a top pick for the Thousand Sons?
Now, again, there are quite a few, but the one I really wanted to talk about is the big man himself, Magnus the Red. So again, there's a million different reasons you can say this model has a place in any Chaos army. But I think the main reasons are, again, with those cults, you know, you have some really interesting list builds that you can have in him. He's a massive utility bag, so he can either be super bulky with a -1 to hit and a 3+ invulnerable save. You can have a more mortal wound based build. Another really nice trick I like with him is that obviously using warp time on himself. So you move up aggressively in movement phase, sit him there, do a ton of mortal wounds, move right back behind something. So again, just really nice utility piece that your opponent is going to be quite scared to see on the table.
Yeah, no, in a beautiful model as well. So very nice. Okay, now we're going to head over into the pointy-eared factions. And we're now going to talk about the quest. The Drakari quest. Now, obviously, again, we've seen some previews of some spicy things to come for the Drakari. So, obviously, our resident Drakari specialist in the house, again, is Jake. So, Jake, I'm going to pass this one over to you.
Joe.
You should see Joe's face. This is an audio-based podcast, but if looks could kill, he's currently giving me the biggest daggers you've ever seen. Go on, Joe. Take it away, my man.
I was told that time is a faction here, so I'm just going to take as much of it as I can.
I said you've got a minute to talk about Drakari.
So, obviously, these are subject to change, but it's not going to be for a couple of months yet, so they've still got a lot of play in them. So HQ... there's lots of options, but the auto-include in every Drakari army at the moment is Drazar.
Bold statement.
He's too good not to take, and he is so cheap to put into the list. And the fact that he gets to attack twice, he's got 2 combat options, he gets +1 to wound, he's flat damage 2, and if you roll a 6 to wound, he goes to flat damage 4. And if he goes for his 6 attacks options, you can play a stratagem on him, so every 6 to hit generates more hits. He'll just carve through anything that he touches. He can go into units of dreadnoughts and just take out quite comfortably on a good roll. For the troops option, I would like to have chosen witches or Cabalite warriors, but Racks are the one to go for. If you're Prophets of Flesh, they're a toughness 4 unit with a 4+ invulnerable save, and they can just sit there and just weather a storm. They're really good like action monkeys for do it like raising banners or deploying scramblers. And the fact that the Prophets of Flesh have a redeploy stratagem, so you can put them down on the table turn 1, have them deploy scramblers, remove them from the table next turn, and then bring them in again and deploy another one. So you get a lot of use out of one 5-man unit.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'll agree with that. And then, okay, what is a top unit for the Drakari?
Well, the obvious choice on this one would have been Incubi, given that Drazar is so good, and they are one of our better units. But Talos overall are, in my opinion, one of the best units that we have access to, especially as Prophets of Flesh with the 4+ invulnerable save. If you've got Ewan Rakarth on the table, who gives them +1 strength and toughness, putting them at strength 8, which means their wounding space remains on 2s. and then you're hitting on 2 from turn 3, like turn 3 onwards. If you've got Kronos on the table, they're re-rolling their wounds. Like, they absolutely smash through Marines, especially with the -2/2 damage. And they've got access to a lot of really good guns, but obviously the Haywire Blaster is the better option for them. Although most of the time they can't hit the broadside of a barn because they're hitting on 4s. But with a lot of firepower coming out of like two of them, like, you're still going to make a dent in something. But once you get into combat, that's where stuff really goes good for you.
Okay, so it's got a long minute there, Joe, on that one.
I'm a man of my word. I took what I could get.
So next up, we've got the Drakari. No, not the Drakari. We've just done the Drakari.
Yeah, more Drakari talk.
No,
Ravages.
no, we can't. No. We're going to move on to the craft world, I should have said. And I'm going to take this one. Really, we needed Ben Jones, I think, to come in. But I think Ben would agree with me on these 3 choices. So at first, we have the absolute all-star, the main man, the Farseer. This guy's powers are just ridiculous. Reroll wounds on a unit, reroll hits on a unit, 5+ feel no pain on a unit, mortal wounds. It can do the lot with a ability to get reroll any of the dice. It is always good when you're casting those powers, or denying as well. So again, very, very good for the Farseer. Can ignore his mortal wounds when he perils is. Like in my game yesterday, I perils 3 times in a row. That was always fun. So luckily I had some sort of inbuilt defense against that. So yeah, the Farseer is a real linchpin for the Eldar to really buff and debuff. Oh, and with the Farseer, on foot, on bike, whatever you kind of prefer, but on bike tends to make them a little bit more mobile. So I would, if I've got the points, always take one on a bike. So next up, we've then got the Dire Avengers for the troops. These guys, what's not to like? They can get exploding 6s. They're pretty cheap. They've got good save. You only have to take units of 5. So it's a minimal investment for a unit that you can start on the table. You could look at Rangers, and it'd be really, I'd love to see Rangers back with their original rules where they could pre-game move. But unfortunately, with the way that they currently operate, they're maybe not quite as strong as just putting a unit down of Dire Avengers. And then for my favourite unit, and I was actually really torn between 3 options. The first option being the new Wraithseer. So the Wraithseer now, with the new Forge World rules, they get access to all of the runes of a battle. So they can jinx, protect, all that good stuff. An absolute monster with D3 plus 3 damage in combat. Toughness 8, -1 to wound is -1 damage, like a kind of dreadnought. Can shoot indirectly with a D cannon, and just is a very good option, I think, for what is 170 points. And you can go even cheaper without that D cannon. Now, the other thing as well, another unit that's stand out for the Eldar is the Shining Spears. Shining Spears, great mobility, hit so hard. Joe's got a look of pain on his face, I think, from being absolutely smashed by Shining Spears over the years. But my standout unit, and I can't wait to watch Joe's face when I say this unit's name, is the new Shadow Spectre.
Oh, yes. They hurt a lot, and I was on the receiving end of them, and it is absolutely brutal, but there is no denying the fact that they are possibly one of the best units that they have access to now.
Oh, so good. And their points make them, a good option. They've got an inbuilt -1 to hit. These guys have got 2 firing modes. So the first one is a 1 pump. And the 1 pump gives you strength 6 -3, flat 3 damage. An absolute marine killer when you're re-rolling hits from Guide and re-rolling wounds from Doom. And you can just get rid of any invulnerable save from Jinx. And then they just move 7 inches and fire and fade them away. Really good option. And then the other option, which I also really like, is a blast option. Strength 5 -1 damage. And, getting a nice little D6 shots per one. So when I'm firing into 2 units of 20 Acolytes, hybrids, and you pick up both units from 1 unit, it's pretty good. How do you feel about that, Joe?
It's brutal, especially when I bought my Gene Stealer cult in, charged 1 unit of Wraiths, failed to kill them with essentially 40 Acolytes, and then 1 unit of these Spectres just coming in and deleting the entire lot without like without really trying hard either. That's the worrying the fact. Is
it was a breeze.
Yeah, they just go, cool, I'm going to put 30 shots on that one, re-rolling hits and wounds, and I'm just going to put 30 shots on that one and re-rolling the hits. Oh, they're all dead.
Yeah.
Done.
It really felt like how Dark Reapers used to play. They're like the new Dark Reapers, what I'm going with. Anyway, so I've banged around about them for too long already. So next up, I'm going to quickly touch base on the Harlequins. Now, the Harlequins for me, again, another favourite army of mine, but for HQ, I'm going to go with the Shadow Seer. Being able to minus 6-inch range off your opponent, -1 to wound for those troops that are nearby, those infantry. So you're basically taking 6 inches off your opponent's guns and then making your or their weapons -1 to wound against you is really powerful. Some nice little inbuilt spells as well for -1 to hit, double move, etc. And then for the troops, their best unit is troops. There's different ways to run these. You can go combat heavy like I do, or you could go fusion pistols in Starweaver heavy, depending on what your preference is. Both are very good in the meta at the moment. Both play the mission very well. And then the standout unit, again, I don't want to just say troops again, but for me they really would be. But the bikes, the Haywire bikes, another good option to look at. Very quick, advancing charge with those Zephyr Glaives as well, can pack a punch in combat. And then just to give a quick shout out to Yanari. Top HQ for me has to be the Incarn, an absolute utility piece and something that, if you don't know how to play against him, he will absolutely tear you apart. So can be really tricksy and works really well with any other combat army. So again, like troops or witches it can pair well with, or any sort of bikes like Shining Spears or the Harlequin bikes pairs really, really well with those. Okay, next up, we're going to look at a faction that we haven't heard of much of lately, and that is the Fishmen, the Tau. Now, obviously, Jack is our resident Tau player, but Jake is going to fill some very big shoes today, or attempt to at least. So, Jake, who is the top HQ and why?
So, I think there's a number of ones that are really good. Mainly, obviously, the Battlesuit Commander is the one that springs to mind, but I think overall, I prefer Shadow Sun. Reason being is because in an army that doesn't have a lot of rerolls, obviously, yes, you have your Marker Lights and such, but doesn't have any access to full rerolls. Shadow Sun allows you to use the Kion ability twice, which is a mass aura of 6 inches. She's already in quite an optimal sept, being the Tau sept, so the 5+ Overwatch one. That's sort of what I like about her. Obviously, she does also have some cool little combat nuances. Overall, I think if you're taking any other septs, like such as Farsight Enclave, a Commander is better. But I think overall, if you're looking at the Tau sept, you can't leave home without her.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. Okay, top troops.
I really like Kroot, and I know probably maybe a lot of people may disagree, but I think Kroot for a Tau army, so the Tau army is a very shooting dominant army. It doesn't have a lot of access to mobile units per se. So by taking Kroot, you're actually allowing yourself to play the mission, to play those things such as engage, deploy, scramblers, anything like that. And I just think if you're going to take Fire Warriors or Breachers, which is just more shooting and less of a unit, for a very similar points cost, you can just take 10 Kroot with a pre-game move, which is massive at the moment.
For denying. So it denies investigate sites in the centre of the table. It denies raise the banners really, really well. So again, and it can also screen out your opponent, which is brilliant. So I'd agree with you there. If you need an action monkey unit, then Kroot are a very good cheap option. That pre-game move is brilliant. Okay, and the top unit choice and why?
Now I really like the Riptide. Again, it's
a classic.
Yeah, it's the bane of a lot of people's lives, mine particularly when going to events. But again, just a really solid unit. You can either give him the Ion Accelerator with the new relic from the new Greater Good book.
Absolute must, yep.
Yeah. Or you could opt for more of a, more shots with 2 damage. You can have targeting array. You're actually now essentially saving 20 points on them with the new monster change from 9th edition. So instead of having to pay 20 points to allow it to move and fire no penalty, it just does it anyway. It can shoot into combat. Obviously, yes, it did lose its retreat and, shoot with fly, but everybody did. So that's not something that specifically penalised the Tau particularly. I do have an honourable mention as well, and that is just Crisis Battlesuits. I just think, again, they're a really nice toolbox unit. Again, just due to the weapon options you can give them, they really can sort of customise whatever meta you're in.
Okay, very nice. Okay, and next up we've got the Necrons. So Joe, back over to you, mate. The Necrons. Give us your lowdown. The top HQ for you.
So Necrons have a lot of options for HQs in the moment, but for this one I really wanted to pinpoint the must-have in your army at the moment, and I honestly think that's the Chronomancer. Necrons are so survivable, he puts levels on top of that. He gives you a 5-up invulnerable save on a unit. He just looks at it. It's any unit, so you could put it on a monolith if you wanted to, but I know because of the Indomitus box, everyone is running these huge 20-man blobs of warriors at the moment. But you can also put it on things like destroyers or even other characters if you wanted to. Then for the troops, I'm going to go for Immortals. Like we said, a lot about the Marine meta at the moment. The Marines, on average, are going to be wounding you on 4s and 5s, but majoritively 5s because a lot of their basic shooting is strength 4. Because your toughness 5, you've got a 3-up save, which is better than the Warriors, and the gun is a lot better.
And you can bring in those codes where you get the cover save as well. So then you're walking around with a 2+ save. Yeah. And I think definitely units of 10 Immortals could be good. So, but again, you've really got to build around them, haven't you? Okay, so what is a top unit of your choice in the Necrons?
My personal favourite, and I think one that we're going to see a lot of when they're released, is going to be the Flayed ones. They've got the same profile as a Warrior, so 1 wound, strength, toughness 4, but they've got 3 attacks each at strength 4 -1, and every roll of a 6 scores an additional hit on top. They can deep strike. They've got a stratagem that allows them to attack twice, and you can take them in units of 20. So when you're looking at the Novok, for instance, they have access to a stratagem which gives them an extra attack on top. So one unit could potentially be putting out 80 attacks just straight out.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
I would like to make an honourable mention of the Lockhurst Destroyer, the original Destroyer of old. Their shooting within the Necrons is something that's really reliable, and they seem to have dropped off a bit. Each one's putting out 3 shots at strength 6 -3 D3 damage, and because they're destroyers, they re-roll 1s to hit, and if you've got a Lord, they're re-rolling 1s to wound. I think having like 5 to 10 of these in a list on a back line is going to do a lot of Necron players some favours.
Yeah, nice. Okay, and then I want to give a bit of a shout out to the Silent King. Played against him recently, and wow, that is a monster to absolutely contend with. So I think we're going to see a lot more of the Silent King, and when used correctly, that is an absolute, just monster to deal with on the table. Okay, so next up we've got the Orcs, and again, Jack, I'm going to try and fill Jack's shoes with this one, but the HQ for me, I would have said the Relic Shock Attack Gun, but obviously not anymore. So without that one, just for the points, that was ridiculous. A big old boss with all the buffs and the stratagems to make him the biggest boss in the Killer Claw and all those things, you can really go well with one, but I feel like Ghazghkull is still the main man to take. His ability just to only take 4 wounds per phase can really shut down some of the builds that we're seeing at the moment, which only really fight in one phase of the game. And I think that is very, very strong, and his ability to walk up to anything and literally destroy it is incredible. So what a massive threat that he is on the table. Okay, and then for the troops, you can't go wrong with Orc boys. You can go big or go home, as I would say with these boys. And I think just so many little nuances that you can actually do with such a large unit. Yes, you will get affected by blast, but when you've got so many of them and your opponent really has to work hard to absolutely eradicate the entire unit, because if they don't, the way that morale now works is very differently to 8th edition, and it's a lot less punishing on those large units, means that the old green tide is more of an option. Okay, so then finally, my top unit, there was different ways to go with this, and I was thinking smasher guns are good. I was thinking just like the scrap jets, the burner bomber. There's loads of different options for the Orcs. But for me, it just comes down to commandos. I just feel like this is 15 guys you're going to have in your list, especially if you're Death Skulls and your OBSEC, just 15 little guys deep striking in, getting you some cheeky engaging all front, doing an action here or there, deploying a scrambler, whatever it might be. Just absolutely fantastic. And I think for their points cost is a must include. So Commandos take it for me. So next up, we've got 2 left. So I'm going to throw it back to Jake with the NIDs, the Tyrannids.
Yes.
So the HQ and why?
So for me, again, the HQ, there's a lot of options that Tyranids have. Unfortunately, a lot of them give up a lot of secondaries. So we look more to the lesser, sort of bigger HQs. And for me, it's the Broodlord. Whether you're running Gene Stealers or not, this guy is incredible. Broody.
So broody.
Very lordy. Just because, obviously, being a really nice combat monster that can't be targeted is something that NIDs do not have access to at all, except for this one model. He's also a Psyker, so if you give him the relic, the Resonance Barb, which a lot of people will agree with me if you're a NID player saying it's the only good relic, it allows him to cast an additional spell and get +1 to cast and deny. Again, just really solid for those sort of builds that you want to be doing with him. He can run and charge. He has a potential for flat 3 damage on his weapons. Again, just really solid. And if you do happen to have Gene Stealers in your army, he gives them +1 to hit as well.
Very nice. Okay, cool. And then your troops, sorry?
Troops is just gaunts, whether that's Hormagaunts or Termagants. Just because, again, cheap. You just want it cheap. You don't want all these different units. And, a lot of you may be saying, obviously, if it's cheap, you might as well take Rippers. You still want those sort of models to be able to screen with. And I just think Rippers don't do that job as well as they used to when you want to be min-maxing before.
They can't do objectives because they're not infantry, right? These Rippers, because they're swarms,
Yes.
am I correct there?
Yeah, 100%. So they can't do raised banners, they can't do deploy scramblers, they can't do investigate sites. They are basically just there to deep strike and do an engage on all fronts, whereas in my opinion, there's a unit, which we'll talk about in my honourable mentions, which does it 1,000,000 times better for cheaper.
Okay, very nice. Okay, so what is your key unit for the NIDs?
Again, I think this comes down to its very specific choice for in my opinion, the best Hive fleet, and it is the Hive Guard. Again, with what you're seeing at the moment, boards being full of terrain, this unit has an indirect line of sight gun, so it can just sit in a building all nice and safe. Really durable as well, not too bad points wise, but then when you get to that gun, it's strength 8, -2, D3 damage, which again for Marines it means, without transhuman and such, you're winning them on 2s. If you're taking Kronos, you're rerolling 1s to hit. You can do a spell on them, which means that every 6 they roll to hit is an additional hit. You don't have to roll for it, and you can 2 CP shoot them twice, which is, again, when you combine all of that together in this one unit, it is so good.
And also with boards being shorter, that 36-inch range is a little bit
really nice.
Yeah, you used to be able to sort of stay out of that before, but now with the way that the game plays, they're a much bigger threat in something that is definitely worth looking at, for those NID players. Okay, you wanted an honourable mention.
I do, and I think it's just because he doesn't get enough love, and that is the Honourable Lone Lictor. Now, a lot of people may be wondering why. It is just as simple as this. He is a single model that is not a character, so he gives no secondaries pretty much whatsoever.
So no assassinate?
No assassinate. Obviously grind them down is a bit of a different story, but he doesn't give up assassinate, which is huge. And all he is there for is a 30-point model to deep strike in for free and do an action. And I think in an army that, where they can't do a lot of secondaries very well, and, they do struggle a bit, having this 30-point elites choice is just absolutely amazing, and I've found a lot of success with 2 of them in my list personally, no matter what high fleet you are.
Yeah, there's nothing stopping you running 3, is there? For 90 points to just do all your objectives when you need to, that's absolutely brilliant. So, fantastic. It just saves you CPs by not having to put units in reserve. And what's the base size that he comes on?
He's on a 40 mil, so he's extremely easy just to sneak into little crevices.
Very sneaky.
Yeah, and obviously, if your opponent wants to use 2 CP to all-spec scan him, let him. He's a single 30-point model. That saves you having to deal with a lot more trouble in the future.
Yeah, I like it. Okay, cool. Triple Lictor then. Nice.
I have got 3.
Okay, so next up then is, and last but not least, is the Gene Stealer cult.
Space Goblins.
The Space Goblins.
Yeah.
Okay, give it to us, Joe. Who is the main man, the HQ?
So the best HQ, in my opinion, for the Gene Stealer cult is the Primus.
Ooh, it's a controversial one.
It is controversial.
The internet is going wild at this moment in time.
So the Patriarch is good, but his only real benefit is that he gives you the auto pass on your morale.
He's a beast.
He's an absolute monster in combat, but you need to help your little goblins out, and the Primus is the man to do that.
So you're going with the Primus because he's a morph of a force multiplier.
Yeah, he gives your army more. In this. So he gives all of your GC the Cult units within 6 +1 to hit in combat, which means that basically everything else in your army is hitting on 2s.
Yeah, it's big. Yeah,
which is really big. And his other inbuilt abilities, when you deploy him on the table, you pick an enemy unit, and your entire army, when they're within 6 inches of him, gets a reroll to wound rolls of 1. He also has access to a stratagem, which allows him to do that a second time. And there is also a Warlord trait, which allows you to pick a third unit, but you get to reroll all wounds versus it.
Yeah, and that's for a very particular...
That's for the bladed cock.
Yeah, very nice.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, and then what is your top unit?
Well, top troops unit.
Top troop unit, yeah.
The top troop unit for me has to go to the Acolyte hybrids. You can run up to a 20-man unit. They have 2 attacks each, and they come basic with a pistol, a dagger, and rending claws. But the real strength from these guys comes from their the availability of special weapons within them, and that has to go to the Roxor.
Reliable as hell, isn't it?
It times 2 strength, -4, flat 2 damage, and there's no negative modifier to hit them with it. So these guys, when they're next to the Primus, are hitting on 2s, and if you have a banner in the unit, it gives the unit reroll 1s to hit. If you do have Zygers in your army, you can give them +1 strength and +1 attack. In a 20-man unit, you get 8 Roxors.
Nice.
Which is good. And then once they've attacked with Roxors, they can then slap you about with their rending claws.
Okay, very nice.
Yeah.
All right. And then your favourite unit then for the Gene Stealer Cult?
Has to go to the Aberrants on this one. I know they're quite pricey to put on the table, but it's a strength 5, toughness 4 unit with 2 wounds. Not much of a save to speak of, but it's got 5 up, feel no pain, and reduces all damage by 1.
And you can get that up to a 4+.
Yeah, at the start of turn, you can spend a stratagem, and you increase their feel no pain up to a 4+. And if you have a banner on the table, you re-roll 1s on that. Like as Steve found out in our game the other night, these guys do not die.
No, that -1 damage as well. Yeah. You know, like my Shining Spears with their top weapons, which are flat 2 damage. It's just 1, and then you just roll 4 ups and they don't die. So it's a very resilient unit, and they do hit hard as well.
They hit really hard. So I've dropped the picks. I don't use the picks anymore. I pay the extra points and give them all the hammers, which is times 2 strength, -3 flat 3 damage. It is -1 to hit, but when you've got the Primus nearby, they're back to hitting on 3s. If you do Might from Beyond on them, so you've got 3 attacks each. And if you're a bladed cog, they've got a stratagem which gives you exploding 6s in combat. If you're attacking an Imperial unit, it's exploding 5s, and if they're an AdMech unit, it's exploding 4s. Ooh. And they will just tear through stuff. And then once you've hit with the hammers, you can then you can attack them with your spiky tail. Get a little extra strength 5,
very nice,
rending attack afterwards.
Very nice. So there we have it, guys.
I would like to make an honourable mention though.
Oh, you got 30 seconds, Joe.
Right. For Gene Stealer Cult specifically, the wonder unit of the Scout Sentinel.
Okay.
It's 35 points. It has a pre-game move. You can give it a heavy flamer, but that's not the bit. It fills out a brigade super cheap for Gene Stealer Cult.
And why is a brigade important for the Gene Stealer Cult?
So you need CPs, and this army is super, super thirsty when it comes to stratagems, because you spend 6 to 7 in a turn.
It's not just the CPs though; it's the fact that you need so many HQs.
Yeah.
And when you have to take the HQs you need, you then have to open up more like detachments. So by taking the brigade, you get the most access to HQs, so you can maintain your CP allotment. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
And this army doesn't have any access to pre-game movers apart from the Scout Sentinel, and it does work as a really good denier on your opponent's secondaries.
Yeah, I think for its points, keep it as cheap as it comes. 3 of them, just fill out that, would you say 30 points a model?
35 points a model, 6 wounds, toughness 6.
Yeah, I think just for those points there, beautiful.
Yeah.
Pre-game move them out, just helps you get that engaged in all fronts if you go first, because normally Gene Stealer Cult don't want to flood the board that quickly, and also it can stop your opponent from zoning you out too hard as well. So I think it's actually a good bit of tech there. Yeah, I think 3 of those is probably worth the points, because you really want to be taking a Primus, a Patriarch, a Magus, and then the Icon Ward. So you want those 4 HQs, and you can't do 4 in a battalion, unfortunately. So Brigade is a great option. Okay, guys, well, that sums up our show today. I hope you really like it. Again, these aren't all the picks, there's plenty of others, and please let us know on YouTube if you're watching, what are your top picks. So put your faction down and what are your favorite picks. Pick your HQ, pick your troop, pick your units, let us know. We can have a really good discussion over on YouTube, or you can join our Discord channel for free as well, where you can access the podcast Discord channel. So again, thanks so much for our sponsors, which are Foreground, and you can check them out at www.foregroundpublishing.co.uk if you want to pick up some of the terrain. I had a bit of an influence on the terrain as well in terms of their 40k set, which we use on the channel. So go and check that out. But again, thank you so much. And if you do like the show, please give us a big thumbs up if you're watching on YouTube or wherever it might be. Subscribe if you're on Spotify or iTunes, and we'll see you next week. But before I go, if you want to see the complete list of this is going to be show notes on our blog page. And to get to our blog page, all you need to do is head over to www.vanguardtactics.com/blog/S2EP16, and you can see all of these written out. So maybe you want to come back to it, whatever it might be, then you can go and check that blog page out to get all the show notes whatsoever. And again, Jake, Joe, thank you very much, guys.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for letting me be here and not tie me to a computer all day.
No problem, Joe. And we will see you guys next week on the Competitive 40k podcast. Take care.